Being after 7:30, it's my high honor and privilege to call the September 30th, 2021 School Committee meeting to order. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. Very grateful to have you here. Unfortunately, we do have a second sad order of business under Article 1. I would like to call for a moment of silence for Mr. Robert Cento, who was a 40-year educator, guidance counselor, and principal in Walpole, and a longtime East Walpole resident who passed away earlier this week. Thank you very much. Moving on to Article 2, we have a recognition. Ms. Jaya Sonchatra for being the MWRA poster contest winner. I see you're joining us today with your family and your principal, so I'd like to invite you and your principal up to the podium if you'd like to discuss the contest and explain to us what you've accomplished. Principal Bemis, would you like to kick it off? Or?
We're very happy that Gia is being recognized this evening, so thank you, School Committee, for taking the time out to recognize Gia and her efforts. I just got done telling Gia that there would be no speeches tonight, so Gia might be a little thrown off. But Gia's going to come up and she's just going to talk a little bit about what she depicted on a poster that won her the recognition. So come on up, Gia.
Thank you. The poster was mainly about how the pipes work with all our water resources, and there was a huge model in the museum in Boston, and there were a lot of games, and the poster was mainly about pipes and how all the water resources work in all our homes, and they connect together, and the sewer drains on all the roads.
Yeah, it was all the good work that the workers at the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority do, and that poster depicted a piece of that, and we like to thank the school and the RA to kind of put that out, to give us an opportunity to show some art and knowledge about MWRA, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Gia. I know we join with your parents, your friends at the Fisher School community, and our whole community of Walpole in acknowledging this really wonderful artistic and informational effort. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Mrs. Gallivan.
I just wanted to say, I think it's really great that you noticed that we should appreciate the fact that we have fresh water coming into our homes, because that's not the case in all countries. And, it's one of those things that sometimes people that are grown-ups take it for granted, meaning that they don't show appreciation. So I thought it was great that you showed appreciation for something that's very, very important to our health. It was really well done.
Further questions or comments? I see in our packet we have your poster here, and we'll work with Mrs. Mortale to make sure that goes out on our e-notes tomorrow to the entire community as well.
That's exciting. I heard it was in the newspaper, so I have to grab a copy at some point.
Yeah.
Excellent. Very good. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Moving on, we have our Walpole High School student report. Perennial favorite Scotty Cameron with an update on the goings-on at Walpole High. Scotty, take it away.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Scotty Cameron. I'm a senior at Walpole High School this year, and I'm the student body representative for tonight. The high school has been very busy as the school year gets underway. Starting with sports, all of Walpole's sports teams have been competing hard in the first few games of the season. First off, girls soccer is 1-6, but they hope to improve their record in the coming weeks. Boys soccer is 2-2-2 after today's unfortunate loss against the number 3 team in the state. Additionally, field hockey is undefeated and hopes to continue their winning streak. Also, there's volleyball, which is 1-5, but hopefully they won today to improve their record. The swim team is 2-3 and hopes to get their 500 record in their meet next week. And after a disappointing loss for both the boys and girls cross-country teams yesterday, both teams hope to improve their records, which are 1-6 and 2-5 respectively, in their next meet on Wednesday. And lastly, there's a football team that has a record of 1-2. They play tomorrow at home, where they hope to even out their record. And with the exciting news of the new mascot, if you attend the game, you will also be able to see the mascot for the second time out around the field and such. I went to the game last week, and it was really awesome to see the mascot. And additionally, outside of sports, today the National Honor Society, Green Team, and Community Service Club collaborated to do a school cleanup after school. So they spent about 45 minutes just picking up trash around the schoolyard. So if you get a chance to go by Walpole High School too, you'll see all the trash being picked up. And additionally, many of Walpole High School's signature clubs, as well as some new clubs, have started up again in these past few weeks. These clubs include Spanish Club, Math Team, Investment Club, Random Act of Kindness Club, Student Council, Jazz Band, Trivia Club, Yearbook Club, Community Service Club, National Honor Society, Best Buddies, PM Club, Art Club, Speech and Debate, Film, Photography Club, No Book Book Club, UNICEF Club, and Green Team. As someone who likes to keep busy, I believe that the extracurriculars are one of the best aspects of Walpole High School, and I'm very pleased to report that they are back in full swing again this year. And lastly, as students begin another year of classes, we are continually inspired by the countless amazing educators at Walpole High School who push us to be our best self every single day. I appreciate all of the work you guys have done the past few weeks to get ready for another year of learning, and I'm very excited for the opportunities that lie ahead. And at this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions, but if not, thank you very much for your time.
Questions for Representative Cameron? Seeing none, thank you very much, Scotty.
Thank you.
Scotty,
Always enjoy having you here.
it's great to have you here, yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. Moving on, we're going to move on to new business. We have, our first order of new business is an extended day update. We have Director Devin Clifford, if you please come forward to give us that update.
Good evening. Before I give an update on extended day program, I want to take a moment to praise the great work and effort of my team. I could probably take up all of tonight with examples, and I'm happy to provide more later if you'd like, but I believe our response to last school year really says a lot, and it's really our first chance to highlight that for them. You know, in a year where we're a special program, or in a year where many of our surrounding schools and towns either canceled their extended day or reduced their offerings, we were able to keep all 4 of our programs open, fully operational all year. And in addition, we were able to develop the remote day program to help supervise both Walpole students and the children of many Walpole teachers during the remote learning days. Throughout the year, you know, the teams refrained each challenge and change was a confident, we'll figure it out. And I'm happy to say, and I fully believe, that they exceeded expectations at the turn. So I want to take a moment to really greatly appreciate my team for all the work they've done in supporting us and supporting me as well. When I took over the program in 2019, I spent much of my initial time watching the programs and learning from the staff that have been the backbone for years. While the overall vision of the program was sound and I think remains to be many of our kids' favorite part of their day, there were definitely aspects that were in need of updating. For example, we were able to transition both our registration and billing processes to online systems. On top of saving time for all, these helped us become more responsive to the changing needs of our families, you know, in both adjusting registrations and doing stuff on the fly rather than having a delayed process for them. We also did a full review and update of our parent handbook, and we're able to update many of our policies and make them supportive of our families. I think a good example of this is, it's minute, but our late pickup policy is no longer, like many other child care programs or after-school programs, doesn't look to curb the late pickups through a financial penalty. I think most of us with kids know about that familiar classic dollar per minute. So moving away from that, our policy now uses a structured approach based on both research and community connections and social contracts that take lots of steps before we get to any of the punitive parts there. And it's working, right? It's working. Lastly, this summer, Mike and I also spent time updating the extended day budget to make sure we were staying financially solid while also investing in updates and new programming for us. To that end, looking forward, our current enrollment is back to the numbers we saw in 2019, which were the highest the team had seen. We just said, hey, no more wait lists, let's get them in and support everybody we can. And while extended day, while we're committed to staying true to the foundations, we also recognize that our needs are going to keep growing and our numbers are going to keep growing. And the expectations of what is possible in a program like ours are also going to keep evolving to meet the needs of their families there. So therefore, we've begun to framing, and with my team, I frame our priorities into two buckets. I speak to them under growth readiness and evolving expectations. Under growth readiness, we've adjusted our student groupings to allow for more differentiated programming throughout the day. We are developing a staff leadership roles to support both staff engagement and retention. We have 6 high schoolers in the pipeline to work for us this year and have plans to continue to formalize a high school assistant program. Looking at you, Scotty. We have a vision for collaboration with other groups within Walpole schools, for example, school nutrition, athletics. Let's reference Scotty's list of high school clubs. I want to talk to all of them and see how we can work together. And then under evolving expectations, we're finalizing both the staff and program rubrics to provide our team more targeted feedback and allow for our families to give more formal feedback twice a year. We have a framework to update our staff training to focus on both positive behavior management strategies from QBS and teaching play using resources that we've got from Playworks, which is another curriculum. And as the weather pushes us inside, we plan to roll out more electives that will be focused on skill building, shared interests, and include opportunities for the 4 elementary schools to bond together through some mutual competition. I've included 2 documents for you as an example of what this would look like in practice. The first one, the Kathy Panos Founder Award. It's an annual award that we started last year, and as it says, it's designed to celebrate and recognize our staff who go above and beyond to create new aspects within our program to have a positive effect on our students and our families. So that is an example of ways that we are trying to incentivize and motivate our staff to really bring themselves in and look at the program and say, all right, it's great, but how can I push this forward? What can I do to have an impact on the families? The Healthy Competition Flyer, that was a program that we piloted last year, and that was primarily driven by me, so I can happily say, well, we need to go back to the drawing board before we started again this year in some aspects. It was a good example of how we can foster student growth within our program, and I think we got a good start there. With that, I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you for your time.
Questions for Director Clifford or comments from the committee? Ms. Gale, sorry, first, we'll go down the line.
Sure. I just wanted to say I think that's a great approach that you guys have, going away from the dollar per minute. That just always struck me in daycare, that it was just such a stressful thing. And if you were late, chances are there was a horrible accident or something. You were rushing to get home from work. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who may, have other reasons, but in general, it was very stressful, I found, when I was in daycare, and I think on the one occasion that happened, just thinking I'm going to be viewed as a bad person, and I think just moving away and making it less, punitive, like you said, is just much better. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
Next, Mrs. Galvin, do you have anything?
No, I've enjoyed your presentation, and it really is nice to see the growth in the program that you, and the energy that you bring to it. But last year especially was something that we're glad to be able to tell you thank you. So
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
Sean?
Thank you for presenting. It was great. My only question was, you mentioned investing in the program, and what does that look like for your program?
Yeah, so actually a conversation Mike and I had just before we went out March 2020. A good example is we spent quite a bit of money bringing in an outside program called Mad Science, right? And I was glad that we were able to start, but also kind of glad that it got cut short, because watching that take place and watching the amount of funds that were going to an outside program, which really checked the box in terms of, all right, we're bringing something in, but when it came to practice with the way our program is set up, with the different days, it wasn't really hitting the mark. And so a conversation we've been having is, how do we grow it in-house first, right? And then to do that, how do I look at my staff and say, listen, instead of taking this and giving it to an outside program, let's look what you're into, let's develop something, and then let's throw the financials behind it. So, if you want to do a Rubik's Cube club, let's buy tons of Rubik's Cubes, let's get you a projector so we can get some how-to videos, stuff like that. So just looking at ways we can really invest in. And on top of that, also sort of updating some of our stuff. I think if you look at the program, they've been doing well what they've had, right? But, I want them to have the, stuff to make them feel quality and feel like they're bringing the best.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Zenitsu.
So, by last June, I think we were all running on fumes, and so I had a lot of items on my to-do list in June that never got done, and one of them was to send a thank you note to you, and praise your staff. So I'm checking that off now. This is my
There you go.
thank you email. But
No, you're still
truly-
going to send that.
Yes, I will. So we have it in writing. But truly, I greatly appreciate the program. I'm a client of the program, and the remote day program in particular last year was a lifesaver for our family and for many families. And I just appreciate that you are so responsive to the needs of families and how families' days look different now than maybe they did 10, 20, 30 years ago. And I appreciate the enthusiasm of the staff, how well the staff gets to know the kids and the families. My kids are angry with me if I pick them up too early for an extended day, which I think is high praise and just speaks to how much they enjoy being part of the program. It doesn't feel to them like something they have to do. And I think that's really important. So I just wanted to say thank you, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much. And I'll say it didn't really fit anywhere in here, but I've really enjoyed this job working with Walpole. I think it's a great town. It's been a great time. So thank you all for the support as well.
Further questions or comments from the committee? Thank you, Devin. We really appreciate the non-classroom support services that we have do a tremendous amount. If Mike, refresh my memory, I think you also defray some of the costs of custodial services and the like, which allows us to, again, importantly, focus
Sure.
Other funds towards the classrooms as well. So all of these things support one another in our district, and we're very grateful to have you and excited to hear perhaps later in the year some additional future plans you may have, and it looks like you're cooking up a lot of great stuff. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks, Devin.
Moving on to our third order of new business. Second, rather, I'm sorry. A reappointment of representative to the Walpole Media TV Committee. Currently, Kristen Cyrek is this committee's representative in the Walpole Media TV Committee. I'll turn it over to her. If you have yet to run screaming from that board, we will entertain a motion.
I haven't.
Perhaps
Thank you.
to,
No,
have you continue.
it is my second favorite board.
Well said. Well said.
No, they're really doing great things, trying to grow Walpole Media to be beyond just television and sort of be a better resource for news for the community. So I really appreciate my time there and the connection back to what we're doing in the school committee.
Excellent. Questions or comments?
I'd be happy to nominate or move that Kristen Cyrek be reappointed as school committee representative to the Walpole Media TV Committee.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Denizio, second by Ms. Gaotitz. Any discussion? I'll take a vote. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600, very good. Vice Chair Cyrek, if perhaps maybe after we get over the middle school horizon, perhaps you could give us an update
Sure.
On that committee later into the winter.
Yep, we have to
Very
share.
good. Moving on to old business, we have a COVID update. Actually, I skipped one, sorry. Our third order of new business is school committee meeting start time, which deals with policy BE. It was brought to our attention by some of our administrators that we begin our school committees the latest out of all of our neighbors and peers. So this is an opportunity to put on the discussion for possible consideration, changing our start time to a little earlier, perhaps 7 or 6:45, although I try to act with a lightning gavel. We occasionally, especially in recent months, have found ourselves going a little bit later, and we understand every member of this board is a working volunteer, so sometimes it is difficult before the days of remote work to get here for 6:30 or 7, but we also understand that it's also a late day for everyone as well. So I would just, with that, Dr. Goff, do you have anything to just kick off the discussion?
Sure, and see if the school committee has any appetite of entertaining this. I know that we're working hard, especially the past couple of years, with COVID, a little bit of a break of trying to have staff come and present at our school committee meetings, and also with, our leadership. And just looking around at the surrounding towns, I think a lot of them start at 7. Some start at 6:30, which may be too early, especially if you have executive session. A couple start, at 6:45, but I did look at a lot of the surrounding towns, and I know that maybe at one point it was because, people's work schedules, and that's why we started at 7:30, but we thought it would be a good idea to just look at it, because sometimes we say, oh, that's the way things always have been done. I don't know if there's an appetite, Bill or Mike, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add in terms of start time, if I missed anything.
No.
Questions or comments from the committee on the subject? Ms. Gaetz?
I know in the past, we've discussed this periodically, and it was mainly due to, like you said, to work schedules, and some people were working in Boston or spouses and such, but at least for me now with COVID and remote work, things are more flexible, so I'm fine moving the start time up now. I know I was one of the people that was opposed in the past because I would have had to miss some of the meetings because my husband wasn't home from work and I didn't have coverage for my kids, but now,
I remember that.
yeah, I'm fine.
And I know, like, we have it in the policy, and other districts do too, that, it's subject to change. And some of them, sometimes they start at different times, but I know for consistency purposes, we always like to start at the same time.
Mrs. Gallagher?
I like my sleep, so I like the idea of starting early, earlier, if it works for people. But I guess I'm looking at the policy part of it and saying, maybe we can just say that the meetings will be held on the second and fourth Thursday of each month, and end right there. Meaning that, it does depend on the individuals who are on the committee, because I would never want to say the meetings are going to be at 1:00 in the afternoon so that everybody who works a regular job is ineligible to be on the, So I would just sort of loosen up the policy, because in actuality, we tend to meet on the second and fourth Thursday of every month, but it's not always that way. We have exceptions to that part, so long-winded answer. I'm supportive of changing it.
And you like your sleep?
I love my sleep. I could go with any of the times that were suggested. I think that's the thing we should discuss.
Ms. Denizio?
I am also a huge fan of sleep, and I'm definitely not opposed to changing the meeting time. But I'm just wondering if we should hold off on a vote, if only to allow the community time to provide feedback. I can't imagine that a half an hour or 45 minutes would have a material impact on people's ability to participate, but I feel like it would be good to just kind of float the idea and just see if there's any feedback that we would get about it before actually making the change.
Well, I know Mark's not here because he has his open house tonight, but
Right.
I have a feeling he might not be opposed to it either.
Point is well taken. We can definitely, we've discussed it, it'll obviously be incorporated in the minutes perhaps. Mrs. Mortale can put some language in there that says, if you feel strongly about this, we're thinking about moving a half an hour or 45 minutes earlier our start times. Please feel free, as you always are able to email the committee, but it probably isn't the worst thing in the world to take another meeting to do that. Further questions or comments? Mr. Aaron?
Yeah, I don't like sleep. I feel like like it's a waste of time, but I also would like the meetings to be earlier. That would be extremely helpful. I think, it would be good to consider what MASC has in their example policies. I think, for me, something that's very vague, the whole policy, I feel like could use a rewrite. It's very specific in some areas where, I don't think it would need to be, and procedurally, some of the, notices is covered in other parts of the policy. But I would,
Yeah, your point's well taken, I think, if it looks like we're moving in a direction to table this discussion till next meeting, and we can definitely put the draft policy in the packet as well. And just, from my point, I was, like Jen, one of those people desperately speeding home from Boston, but now that I'm coming home from Dedham, it's a lot quicker, and I have a lot more flexibility now in that commute period, so I would favor moving it back, but I think I feel some sort of consensus to table this until next meeting, and we'll have the community have an opportunity to weigh in as well, and we can go from there. Anybody want to codify that in a motion to table until next regular school committee meeting?
make a motion to table this until the next regular school committee meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hunt, second by Ms. Anitzia. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 6-0-0. Very good. Now we move on to old business. We have COVID update. We have
All right.
our
can
nurse
start.
manager extraordinaire, Kathy Garvin, here with all of the data for us. And
I'll
Dr. Goff, would
I'll
you like
start,
to
and then
start it off?
Kathy can fill in the holes. How about that, Kathy? So as you may know, and this is in your packet, on September 27th, the commissioner announced that the mask requirement will be in place until at least November 1st. The commissioner will review the requirement in the near future to revise it as warranted by public health data. However, as of October 15th, if a school demonstrates a vaccination rate of 80% or more, then the vaccinated individuals in that school would no longer be subject to the mask requirement. Whether or not a district avails itself to the 80% vaccination off-ramp is a local decision to be made by the school and district leaders in consultation with local health officials. So we know that there is a school committee policy in place, so whether that happens or not after October 15th, we would have to discuss this at the next school committee meeting. Unvaccinated students and staff would be required to continue wearing masks. If or when one of our schools reaches the 80% threshold, we must submit an attestation form to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for approval. They will respond within 2 business days. Kathy Garvin has been working with nurses to enable staff to demonstrate proof of vaccination. This must be done at all levels, as one, staff other than those who work at Walpole High School may access the building for meetings and training. And 2, this enables nurses time to prepare for other school buildings once vaccination for those under 12 become available. Also in your packets are the vaccination updates and positivity rates. So if you take a look at that page, you can see that Walpole High School at this point has, if you look at the total full vaccination rate, it's 72.5%. This is up from 69.7% on 9/15, and then if you remember in August, it was 61.5%. So we're making some nice gain here. As of 9/25, 5.5% of Walpole High School have had, students have had 1 dose. If they get the second dose, this would increase the number to approximately 78%. However, a high percentage of this population are overdue for their second vaccination. 22% of Walpole High School students have not been vaccinated, so 0, that means they haven't had their first dose as of September 25th. The positivity rates as of 9/25 is 18 total cases. Last year, there were 5 cases in the month of September. We had 2 positive cases this week. You also have in your packets the Walpole DPH update as well. The vaccination rates are released every Friday, so in your packet, that's what you have as the latest update. Melissa Raderi, from the Department of Health, indicated to me that We did get Walpole's positivity rate, that came out today, and that was 1.83%. So we're moving in the right direction because we were a little over 2% last week. So that is good news. Also included is just an FYI, is just some COVID updates from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. As I get them in my meetings, I will forward those pieces of information to you. Test and Stay has been extremely successful. It's really allowing our students to remain in school. It is another great mitigation factor. We've had, for example, approximately 160 close contacts, and students, through being vaccinated or participating in the program, we've been able to keep a very high majority of students in school. So it's really employing multiple strategies. So it's a layered approach, and we want to keep our students safe, but we want to keep them in school. Our aim is to continue with in-person and not go virtual. So Kathy, did I leave anything out?
No, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sure, yeah, okay. Ms. Garvin, if you want to come up to the microphone. Questions or comments from the committee? If I may, I'll start. You gave me a great answer, but if you could just kind of unpack, as you did at our first meeting, how we are getting the vaccination statuses of our high school students and what measures we are taking, and I know we are taking, to keep that health information confidential within our school system.
Right, so it's a statewide immunization registry, and we actually only have currently, at the high school at least, 4 students whose parents have not elected to data share at some point. So
Okay.
I think it's probably, because I know I've checked, my kids are in there, and I don't recall being asked particularly, did I want to share it? So I think it's more of one of those negative opt-outs. You get some paperwork probably when you come in, maybe the first time to your pediatrician, and it's probably in that big packet of, information about the practice, and it probably says, if you do not want your child's vaccination information shared, then you need to, let us know. And I'm sure, the majority of people don't do that. So if you change pediatricians and you lose your paperwork, it doesn't matter as far as the vaccines, because the next pediatrician, if you've done this data sharing, can go in and find all the vaccines that you've ever had in Massachusetts. So we are, as a school district, the nurses can access it, and it's through our SNAP health system, which is a very secure portal. It actually, sometimes it drives the nurses crazy, because every so often the internet will have just a little blip, and it doesn't affect anything else you're doing. But if there's that little blip, the whole thing shuts down with SNAP, and then you have to reboot everything. So it is a very secure system. Only the nurses can get in to access that data. And obviously, it's just, we also, if we get a physical from a family, we put in the data from that as well. That's where we keep our logs of all the visits of students who are coming to see the nurses. So again, it's a secure portal. And that's how we get the information. We go in and we synchronize with the MIIS. So that's how we know. That's how I can also see that out of the 59 students who at the high school who had 1 dose and were 41 were overdue, the vast majority, for some reason, are well overdue. Like between May and July, received their first shot. So they should have, at this point, really received the next vaccine. So we're looking at what might be causing that, and maybe getting some more education out to families. But that's one way we can see that. When the staff, last year, most staff did tell their school nurses that they received it, but we didn't ask for verification. According to the regulations that we're being told about removing masks, we will have to physically see the vaccine card. So we're also going to ask the staff member if they want us to put it in our health portal. That way, if they lose their card, at least they'll have a legitimate record of it that we can provide for them. So I think probably most will want to do that too.
Thank you, Ms. Garvin. To circle back to your initial comment, did you say 4 students or 4% of students?
4, just
4
only
humans.
4 came up
Okay.
at the high school.
Right, so I think that's
right.
an important piece, because when we talk about how accurate our numbers are, numbers are exceedingly accurate. Could you speak to it? I know we did, through your efforts, get a vaccine clinic at the high school at the beginning of school. Have you seen most of those? Can you track in that sort of subgroup? Have all those people been able to make an appointment?
Yeah,
the
so
second
we
one.
had the first clinic that the health department ran for us, our Walpole Health Department. We had approximately 180 students between 7th and 12th grade that came through last June. And those students pretty consistently came back on the third week, as I understood it from the health director. And then the one that we ran right at the start of school, I was a little disappointed because we only had about 35 kids sign up. And then only, I think 28 showed up on the day of August 30th for the first shot. Then 24 signed up for September 20th, and I think maybe 20 showed up. So, you know, that could have just been because they just couldn't come on that day, and it didn't mean they couldn't go elsewhere to get it that week. But there were a couple that came on, got their first shot on that second clinic and haven't yet gotten there, so. But to that, when I was running the numbers over the weekend, you know, the data is getting put in there so fast that I was seeing that first doses, when I was running it on Sunday, I had some students who got their first dose on Friday. So it was really up to date, so.
Excellent. Other questions from the committee, Ms. Denise Sue?
I'm wondering if maybe some of the hesitance for some of these students to get the second shot has to do with the fact that we know that sometimes symptoms occur after the second shot, and maybe families, for whatever reason, they don't want their students down for the count, whether it's missing school, missing a sports practice, or anything like that, which is understandable, but I wonder if some of them might also be fearful that they have to undertake like a quarantine procedure if they're symptomatic after the vaccine. Can you explain a little bit like what
Sure.
the protocol is around that?
So there are actual pretty clear guidelines once you've had your either of the shots, if you come down with any type of symptoms. And typically it's not, it's considered all, you know, basically a side effect and you're not expected to quarantine. But if, say you got a temperature of 102.2 or something, that would be out of the ordinary and they would have you go for an actual COVID test. And the vaccine, receiving the vaccine will not trigger a positive PCR test, only if you've had have the virus. And we did have earlier in the year, the other thing is when we have a positive case, we're now checking to see if the student's vaccinated so we can track for any breakthrough cases. And it was a few students that came through over the summer that were positive. We weren't worried about quarantine or anything because it was the summertime. But in looking at vaccine status, had received one not too long beforehand. But again, since it cannot trigger it, they probably had already been exposed. And, you know, and I don't know, it's quite possible that they heard somebody was positive, that they were near and they said, oh, we better go get our vaccine. And fortunately, it was just a little too late, but.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments on the committee? Mrs. Geller?
You were describing the system that you use to get the information from the state, Kathy. And I'm assuming that disaggregates Walpole residents that don't go to Walpole High School from those that do. Like, in other words, is it a one-to-one kind of a thing, or are you getting all kids who are 16 years old in the data?
No, it's only aligns with, it aligns with a student's name and birth date.
Okay.
So it's very specific.
Yep,
I can't access like Norfolk Aggie or anything.
that's what I thought. I just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Further questions or comments?
I
Dr.
just
Geller?
need to thank Kathy publicly for her hard work, because you're really a lifesaver, so I really appreciate it. It's like 7 days a week for you. And like I said, she's my new best friend.
Well, I
That's
get a
very
lot of
good.
support, so I appreciate that.
I was telling someone the other day, we had you speak to the finance committee maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and you gave numbers on number of finger sticks, insulin shots, EpiPen shots you give, daily medication doses that you track, and how, I remember the finance committee at the time was just kind of taken aback by just how many individual patient interactions your staff has to start with. And then you were doing yeoman's work and your staff with tracking of positive cases, and now we have test and stay, which, by the way, I was at an open house this week and speaking with the elementary school nurse, and she's like, parents love it,
Yeah.
I love it, it's so good to be able to so quickly do this, and I know because of your planning. There are some towns around us who are still waiting for tests and who have contracted it out, and they wait 2 hours with a student in a nurse's office. So it kind of speaks to all the layers of work on top of the already difficult job you have as a nurse leader. So I think that's wonderful. This data piece is very helpful because we had community questions on it. So I would, as far as, if people don't have other questions, as far as points of departure for this committee, I would think the message would be wait and see, have you deliver either from yourself or from Dr. Goff an additional update. I believe our next meeting is the 14th of October,
Perfect time.
which once again is, we thought this meeting would be a totally timed meeting, and the goalpost was moved. So I think just to continue to have these type of updates, I think the width and breadth of the information is very helpful. We'll again put it in our update, but we just want to be very clear, I think, in the communication that comes from us, which you from your own communication have, that just exactly what the stipulations are, what we're being asked to look at, and what the requirements are. So now we've kind of really underscored that our data is quite sound, and we are about 8% away before we can even, as a committee, entertain this idea. The 15th, and then we have obviously another date of the 1st of November as well, which luckily we have a meeting on the 28th of October as well. So it seems like you and your staff are going to be in a recurring agenda item this fall. But we thank you. Are there any other questions or comments, Mrs. Galloway? And then
Yeah,
Mr.
I have
Ahern?
2 little ones, but I definitely want to thank you for all you've done. It's amazing, amazing, and we can't thank you enough. These are more for Dr. Goff, I think. I don't think the information is showing up on the website. You know, the, like, week to week. Or at
Okay.
least I looked for it twice
All
and
right, I
haven't.
can check with tech because it should be up there in the,
I know-
in the COVID, when you go to the middle, and Bill will look at for it now. It says COVID, and when you click on the COVID updates, it should be at the bottom of the
Okay, so
the
maybe it's in
screen.
a place that I
Yeah,
wasn't.
it should be under the COVID-19 update button.
Okay. Yeah, we should double check that.
Yep.
Maybe it's me.
Okay.
I also can't picture how it would work logistically if we were to say the vaccinated people don't have to wear masks any longer. How do you implement something like that without having it be really difficult for all the staff members to, like, who monitors that? So, you know, I think that's,
Right, yeah, exactly.
you know, that's the conversation
Exactly.
that you know,
Yeah.
before we have to decide, I just am giving you the heads up, but
Yeah,
that would
no, good
be,
point. Yeah, we've talked about that, you know, of deciding
It's
how
tricky
how do you
because, right, you
monitor
know-
the 20% that need to continue to wear masks.
right, and you don't want to make them wear, you know, everybody wear a red T-shirt because you're the ones,
Right.
or something like that. On the other hand, you know, it's going to make people uncomfortable, especially as we get into the indoor winter season
Correct.
and flu season, and so somehow,
And I think it may take, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, it may take time to get to that 80% because, you know, just when you're looking at the number of people that need to get that second shot, you still have to wait, is it 3 weeks after you get that shot before you're fully vaccinated? So even if you, all of a sudden, you know, you get that second dose to hit the 80%, it's still going to be, you know, several weeks out. But it's a good point, and we've discussed that, and we've been discussing that with leadership too.
It's going to be a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Mr. Buckley reminded me of something. I should do a quick shout out to my nurses because this year is back to normal as far as numbers of students and where they're at. So the visits to the nursing office and just they're fabulous. I always tell them, start out with they're the best nurses on the East Coast, say west of the Mississippi and even past California. But the that meeting you were referring to, I remembered that a finance committee person asked me if I misspoke because I said that by February we had 21,900 and something visits for the school year, and he said, I think you misspoke, you meant 2,190, and I said, no. By February, the nurses had seen 21,900 and something, and it does run about 3,000 visits a month, and we're right back into that, so on top of their contact tracing and everything else, so they are a fabulous group. So.
Thank you.
To your point, as we start thinking, somebody mentioned the flu. Are you doing any thinking about, on top of everything else, kind of flu clinics?
Yeah, my
Clinic is Sunday.
Sunday,
Yep,
excellent,
this Sunday.
very good.
This Sunday, yep. Go to the health department's website and sign up if you haven't gotten your shot yet. And they ran one for staff, for the
Did they? For
municipal
town
and town and school employees on September 9th.
Good.
They had a very good turnout.
Sean, did you have a comment?
Yeah, one question and a comment. I was wondering if the breadth of their any staff member statement, providing regular and school services, contracted services, also engaged to provide goods and services, part-time employees, non-student facing, like the breadth of those that they consider to be staff changes or like moves the marker in a negative direction, so to speak, I guess.
Good. Yeah, we have to include all staff, all staff.
Yeah. When you guys attempted to collect stuff previously, did it include, like, literally for the high school, like everybody that has
Like
contact
food service.
with the building and, yeah.
Custodians,
Mhm,
yeah.
everybody.
It wouldn't have included, like, I don't think we included, like, the couriers or
Right.
you know.
Yeah,
And,
coaches, assistant coaches,
we would have to add them for sure.
after-school supports.
I think when we did that last year, of course, it was spring season, so it was outside, we weren't quite as, quite as nervous about it.
It's not a lot of individuals, but as we get closer to that 80% mark, it definitely, we want to be very clear about who we are required to count.
Right.
And making sure we've counted all those
Sure.
things. So,
Yeah, and just a final comment, you know, I like rules to an extent, but I always like to push the envelope in the gray area, and, you know, I don't like when it says in there, 80%, and then it removes, like Nancy had just asked the question about 80%, and the students that are vaccinated can take the masks off, the students that are unvaccinated can't, and creating that stigma. And then, that would be for high school and middle school, but, things like community spread, community vaccination rates of vulnerable populations. There's a lot of other data points that I feel like DESE is not considering in masks and in general with their, rollback or how they implement policies. It kind of seems short-sighted, distancing and things like that. And, I'd like to see, they don't leave any wiggle room as of yet, but, if there could be other means explored that continue to keep kids safe, but it gives everybody the freedoms that, an education
Yeah.
should have.
Well, as the commissioner updates us, we'll update you.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I don't know if the commissioner would ever watch this, but, the commissioner, there's been people that have been sending you similar messages as to what I'm saying, and it would be great to acknowledge that that is a thing. And alienating a student population is an egregious way to run a state school system.
Anything further? Well, I'm sure you like sleep as well, Kathy.
Yes.
Yes,
I'm one of that club.
Thank you very much,
You're
Ms.
welcome.
Garvin. for
See you in
your-
2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks. Excellent.
Thank you, Kathy.
Moving through old business, our next item is a middle school building project update. We have Mr. Brian Jarvis of Compass Project Management, who's been doing the roadshow all over town of our middle school project, and will here present to us today. Dr. Goff, would you
Sure,
like to kick
I
off?
can kick it off, and I think, Patrick, you can put it up on the screen, and then we'll get started with the first slide. As this is coming up, just a quick information about the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Just as a review, the MSBA, they really strive to work with local communities to create these affordable, sustainable, and energy-efficient schools across Massachusetts. And the MSBA dedicates revenue stream of 1 penny of the state's 6.25% sales tax. And they collaborate with municipalities to equitably invest in finding what they call the right-sized, most fiscally responsible, and educationally appropriate solutions to create these safe, sound, and sustainable learning environments. So by meeting all of their requirements, a very rigorous and comprehensive process of many deliverables, Walpole is now eligible to receive $37 million of state funding. And the process is really dictated by the MSBA. So the slide that you see here, and you can actually look at the back wall, is part of our middle school project team, and it's the Walpole School, comprised of the Walpole School Building Committee. The Walpole School Building Committee meets frequently throughout this process, and a lot of the decisions, if not most or all of the decisions, are made in conjunction with the Walpole School Building Committee. So everything is vetted and voted upon as we get to where we are today. So you can see that there's public school representatives on here, Town of Walpole representatives, we have a finance committee member, a select board member, our town administrator, we have planning board members on there, we have community representatives, and then we have our Compass project management team. Tape is our architect, and David Stephen was instrumental in, from New Vista Design, in creating multiple community forums to get a visioning process for the new middle school. Next slide. So looking at how we got here, Walpole Public School contracted with the McGuire Group to provide this comprehensive master planning study to address the facility needs of the school. And the report also identified Johnson Middle School as having major deficiencies. In 2016, there was a secondary school space study option conducted by DRA Associates. And then in 2016, we applied to the MSBA program with our first SOI. So it took a few tries, and then we were finally, you can see there, we were invited into the eligibility period in 2018. We were fortunate. There were 70 statement of interest that were submitted, and 12 were accepted, and only 3 were middle schools. It was really a big win for Walpole. The town appropriated $1.5 million for a feasibility study. And what was great is the MSBA recognized Byrd Middle School as having the deficiencies and to focus on Byrd Middle School, but they also recognized the needs at both middle schools. So they did approve a study for both enrollments and possible consolidation. And then finally, in 2019, we were invited into the feasibility invitation. We were one of 4 schools. And that feasibility study carefully examined the potential solutions to the issues identified at these school facilities, and really helping us to develop the most cost-effective plan to address those issues. Next slide. Then moving to 2020 to 2021, that's really the feasibility and schematic design timeline. We had our operating project manager approval through Compass, TAPE, our designer selection, and we submitted the preliminary design program. And then we continued with what was known as the schematic design process, where we submitted the plan in July, and it was approved by the MSBA board on August 25th. And as you can see here, we've had multiple community forums along the way. We have one last one coming up, which I'll show you in a second. And we're really fortunate to have Compass. I think you all know that they've worked on a lot of town projects, library, council on aging, fire department, and they are well-known for coming in on time and under budget. Next slide. This is just a slide to just show all of the deliverables, all of the completed phases and milestones. It's really a comprehensive process of a lot of deliverables, from the 65-page educational program to a space study. We had to evaluate all the possible scenarios to really explore one building or a consolidated enrollment. And then in terms of the preferred schematic report, getting us down to short list options and getting to the preferred solution, which was consolidation. And that was the most cost-effective and educationally appropriate solution. And then you can see on the right the schematic design report of and everything from traffic analysis to sustainability to ADA, geotechnical, and we're 30% through the schematic design. Next slide. This shows the key components from the educational plan of a middle school. Really what the ed plan does is it establishes this comprehensive and thoughtful educational program or that articulates the educational goals and the needs of the district. And it provides for future flexibility, which is important, that we can adapt to changes in programming or teaching methodologies over the life of the school. Walpole Middle Schools, as you know, we're committed to educating students in an inclusive environment where students have equitable access to resources and engaging opportunities to learn and thrive. Teaming, you'll see, is really at the heart of the middle school philosophy, and the design of this combined middle school must promote an environment where our students, our staff, our families, and our community members can come together to build collaborative partnerships. Next slide. If you remember, back in December in 2020, school committee voted unanimously to pursue a combined middle school enrollment that was for 905 students. And you can see here some of the rationale for that consolidation. We talk about equitable access, that all students will receive the resources and educational opportunities to learn and thrive. Teaming, I talked about that. In order for students to truly feel this sense of belonging and connection, that we really benefit from being in a small learning community that must be grouped in this clearly defined, consistent teams, which then is a part of the fabric of the larger school. We also can develop improved school programming and related arts offerings. So to give us a more robust related arts curriculum and after-school programs that can't run at this point due to enrollment. And finally, I think one of the most important issues in terms of fiscal responsibility and accountability is that a combined middle school is significantly more cost-effective than building separate projects. And if it's separate, it could be more than 8 years to complete a second project with MSBA funding. You can see here in terms of some of the renderings, the square footage is 162,193 square feet with 45 classrooms, 5 classrooms per team, 3 teams per grade, and we have neighborhoods and sense of community. Next slide, please. There'll be a separated car bus circulation loop, overflow event parking, and a new entrance to East Street. So that's more of an aerial view. Next slide. Yep, keep it right there on this floor plans. Thank you. Looking at grade level teams, in the ed program, it was mentioned at least 79 times, and teaming was mentioned almost 140 times. So neighborhoods really equate to this building geography and drive our core academic spaces. It's organized, as you can see here, by 3 grade level teams, 3 teams per grade, and support the school's team-based approach to curriculum delivery. It does contain a variety of flexible spaces, our special education programs, our academic support rooms. All of that is an inherent part of our neighborhood. Our neighborhoods really will contain 4 general education classrooms, a dedicated science classroom, and what we call a STEAM, that's science, technology, engineering, and math, to facilitate our inquiry, our presentation, really project-based learning to get authentic real-world experiences and collaboration. Next slide. So neighborhoods should really have this feeling of home and that they are comfortable and safe. In sending a message to students, they are part of a small learning community, which in turn is connected to the fabric of a larger school. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. This building maximizes and enables greater flexibility with regard to delivery for all services and builds a stronger learning environment. Next slide, please. Thank you. We have an equitable access to 21st century learning environments and programming, from technology literacy and computer science lab to multimedia and video production labs. So really these labs bring these interactive and immersive experiences through virtual reality platforms. So they learn the skills and they're able to apply them so that they can really solve unique design challenges and create authentic solutions. It will also enable us to build our robotics program at the middle school and our news production team. Both of those are huge programs at the high school, so they have a nice feeder program. A dedicated auditorium. We have a very large music program. Every student takes a music, band, chorus, orchestra, and general music. One of the courses you see here will take place on the stage, but then there'll also be a classroom behind the stage in order to fill that need for our music program. We also have a robust drama program at each middle school, and this will also allow for community-based performing art groups, community meetings, and community events. The dining space, as well as the kitchen, will also facilitate community outreach, accommodating off-hour school and community education and partnerships. Finally, the central kitchen and cafeteria will be utilized for vocational opportunities for our special education programming. This space will support job training and hands-on learning for our special education students. This partnership is integral to, it's a large part of our inclusion program. And finally, taking 2 gyms from each middle school and creating 1 larger gym, and also having 1 teaching station that will be shared with special education programs. This allows for adaptive phys ed, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and we'll really have this dedicated space so we can meet all of our students' needs and allow for peer integration. The visioning sessions also expressed a strong desire to build a school that allows for community access, and that's what this building does. It actually has that access, so you're able to shut it down and have that access at one end of the building. And it provides performance venues, gathering spaces, athletic spaces, really can safely be accessed by the community after school, on weekends, and during the summer months, both in the auditorium, the cafeteria, and the gym. I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Next slide. Thank you, Dr. Goff. Quickly, sustainability, energy efficiency. So big movement in the state, obviously a lot of state mandates that public buildings are going to need to meet in the coming years. And the goal of this building is to get out ahead of that. The building will be targeting a LEED Silver status, leadership in energy environmental design, which is not only energy efficiency, but it has to do with sustainable products, distances where products come from, water conservation, access to public transportation, things of that nature. Everything goes into LEED, not just energy efficiency. However, the building will have systems that are 20% or more energy efficient than Mass Energy Code requires, and that will allow the district and the town to pick up an additional 2 incentive reimbursement points from the MSBA. We're also partnering with Eversource and Mass Save and some of their partners to seek rebates and incentives at different stages of the project, both pre-construction, during construction, and post-occupancy when the building is up and running. The building will be net zero energy ready to meet some of those state mandates that are coming, which means that once a renewable energy source is brought online, that the building will offset its energy use throughout the year. It doesn't mean it goes off the grid, it just means at the end of the year your utility bill should be zero. The building is situated for optimal soil orientation, and that is the thinking that the building will be set up for photovoltaic systems as that renewable energy source. Next slide. Getting into the numbers quickly, total project budget, which I'm sure you've heard, $115 million total project budget. That's how it breaks down by the major categories. Feasibility and schematic, obviously approved already at the prior town meeting, which is what the project has been using to get to this point. Project management, architectural and engineering, construction cost. And pointing out the construction cost actually has a few things that make it up. Not only the cost of the work, but right now we're carrying a CM at risk delivery method, which means that we're bringing a construction manager on early to do some design services and pre-construction services with the team if approved. They also will have a contingency within the budget for their own use during the project to offset the need to use the owner's change orders. And then also, we're also carrying market escalation. The construction market has been crazy the last year. Not only are we carrying current pricing of what is out there, but also anticipating increases in pricing of about 6-7% before this is actually finalized at the end of next year. Utility costs, furniture, fixtures, and then owners' contingencies, both construction for change orders and soft costs, meaning additional furniture, architect fees, or something of that nature, make up the 115. Quick recap on MSBA funding. So basically, the MSBA takes the total project cost. They knock out any ineligible costs. They have 3 main categories of that. Something is categorically ineligible. The cost of something exceeds their caps, or the spaces that are within the building exceed some of their guidelines, and they review all of that, and they knock out any potential items that are ineligible according to their policy. These are some examples of those. Categorically ineligible, swing space, meaning if you have to renovate a school and bring in temporary classrooms, that would be ineligible. Synthetic turf, if you do that, a field with a synthetic turf, that's ineligible. The big one for the middle school is the auditorium. Doesn't mean you can't build it, they just consider it to be ineligible for a middle school curriculum. A lot of districts disagree with that and do auditoriums. Costs exceeding caps. The big one here is the middle one, building costs exceeding $360 per square foot. What this means is that the MSBA is not saying you can build a building for $360 a square foot. They're just saying they're capping their reimbursement. So they take the difference between what the cost of your project is per square foot, deduct the $360. That difference times the square footage is ineligible, comes right off the top of the project. And then costs for spaces that exceed the guidelines. Walpole actually has a couple spaces that exceed guidelines. The additional classrooms for the teaming, 45, when you do the math for the MSBA policy, they come up with 36. They actually found those classrooms to be eligible for reimbursement because it's supported by the educational program. The MSBA always goes back to the educational program to support what's in your design. If it's not supported, then they can find it ineligible. Core academic spaces were eligible. The third gym, the central kitchen, all deemed eligible by the MSBA. They take out those ineligible costs. They apply the reimbursement rate to what's left over. And that's how they come up with your reimbursement. Walpole's base rate was 48%. With the added energy efficiency points and our maintenance, capital maintenance plan, they gave us an additional 1.54, so we have an additional 3.5 points on top of that for 52% as a stated base rate. And then they apply that against anything that's eligible and come up with what they believe would be their estimated maximum facilities grant, which is roughly $37 million. Just to recap, 115 total project budget, 52% of eligible costs are eligible for reimbursement. At the end of the day, when you take out ineligible and apply the 52% to what's left over, you actually realize about 30%, 32% of the total project budget, 37 million. The town shares 78. Town meeting that's coming up, the way the MSBA works is you have to approve the entire budget at town meeting. You just can't approve the 78. You approve the entire budget, and then you submit reimbursements throughout the process. That's what we've been doing in feasibility. That's what we'll continue to do during design and construction if approved. This is just a chart showing the comparison, the orange line of the average cost of construction and how it's basically gone up every year since 2009, which is the first dot on the map. That's Norwood Senior High School. And the red arrow points to the delta between that and what the MSBA reimburses at 360. So that gap is, you're trying to keep that as tight as possible, because again, that delta comes right off the top of your total project budget, and the MSBA takes the reimbursement out of what's left. So Walpole Middle School is slightly below the average cost of what's currently in the market, which we think is a good thing, at $571 per square foot. How does that stack up to some other projects in the surrounding areas? Again, kind of in the middle, and the thing to point out here is this is a middle school project. Bigger school, more equipment, different types of spaces. A lot of these are elementary school projects. Almost all the ones above Walpole on this list are actually elementary school projects. And you can see by the column second from the right how the square footage costs line up compared to Walpole. Obviously a little bit smaller school, but still very expensive for what some of those communities are facing. That $78 million town share translates into an average tax impact to a residential assessed value of about $438 per year. And that's based on a relatively conservative borrowing rate of 3.5% over 30 years. Possibly could be lower than that, but right now we're carrying a conservative amount at 3.5. Comparison to two of the neighboring towns that are currently doing projects right now, Westwood and Medfield Elementary School. And you can see in this graph here that their base rate in Westwood was 39%. They're actually going to receive about 21% when all the ineligible costs are taken out, leaving them a grant of about $18 million for their project. Medfield, a similar situation, starting at 39, after an eligible cost about 23, they'll get about 19 million. Walpole starting at 55, getting about 32, they're going to receive 37 million from the state. And you can see the tax impact. Obviously Medfield, much lower commercial base than Walpole, almost $900 to the average taxpayer. Walpole at 438 is in a pretty good position. Next steps, goes to town meeting. If approved, we would execute a scope and budget agreement and a project funding agreement, basically the contract with the MSBA. The town originally executed a feasibility study agreement. The project funding agreement funds the project through design and construction. Yep, and that would happen after an approved project at town meeting or at the ballot. There's been some questions recently about why not wait and get an actual bid to go to town meeting so you actually have a hard number. The MSBA process requires that a town approves the project at the end of schematic design, which is where Walpole is now. The reason being is they don't want to appropriate any more money. It could be almost $10 million or more for the design phase until they know that the town is engaged and authorized the process. They don't want to go down that road only to have a project fail after the town and the state have spent tens of millions of dollars. Can you do it without a bid? Absolutely you can, but the MSBA will not participate. So a lot of towns find out that they either vote the project down or they decide they can't wait for a project and they go in without MSBA funding, and you're basically on your own. What happens if it's not approved? The MSBA gives you about 10 days to come up with a plan to get it approved, assess why it failed and what you'd have to do to have it be approved, and usually that's not an easy fix. So most of the times, and it's most likely, the MSBA would close the project, and Walpole would have to start all over again, submitting a statement of interest, and it's not guaranteed that you get accepted on the next round. Some schools wait multiple years to get accepted back into the program. And to date, the town has already spent 3 years and $1.5 million to get just to this point. There's also concerns that, well, if you don't have a bid, how do we know we have a accurate number? What are we actually getting for the money? How guaranteed is that number? Nothing is guaranteed, obviously. It's the best process that we can go through. It's the MSBA's process, which is a tried and true process, and all we can do is speak from experience. For some examples, we've listed the last 6 projects that we've been involved with the MSBA. We've only done school projects with the MSBA. We haven't done any outside of the MSBA project. These are the last 6 that we have worked on or are currently working on. The approved budget is what their town meetings approve for those projects, and the final cost is what those projects ended up at. They're under budget, and that varies for a lot of different reasons. The big one is that at the end of the day, a lot of times you don't end up spending as much of your contingency as you originally budgeted. Obviously, you want to make sure you have enough to cover things that pop on a project. But if the project is well done and goes through with a traditional or a historical amount of change orders, you typically come in a little bit under budget. So all we can do is recommend, based on our experience, that the MSBA project is a very thorough project to make sure that you're setting a number that is realistic for the town to complete that project. The Ashland one is highlighted simply because they're doing this, they did this through COVID. They had an approved budget just before COVID hit of $84 million, and they're starting construction this month, and they're currently on budget. So projecting that same trend, Ashland should come in within that $84 million budget. And that's significant because they went CM at risk as well, which is what Walpole is doing. And what's allowed them to try to maintain that budget is actually having the contractor on board during the process prior to starting construction of what is the market doing, what is the value of this, how can we manage costs a little bit better, change some things up. And working with a construction manager during the process has helped them keep that budget. Timeline, if it gets approved, about 32 months of construction, 3 phases, enabling, build a new building and take down the old bird, finish up the parking lot. Overall, about 32 months with final reimbursement from the MSBA, late 25, early 26. The building would open in 2024. The new school would be in operation when we take down the old school and finish the parking lots. Very, very traditional approach on school sites, because usually existing school sites are the best sites for schools. Our Natick project is just wrapping up now, and during construction, we were as close as 30 feet between the 2 buildings. Same thing, we did the same thing at Norwood High School, same thing at Stoughton High School. Just a graphic of that timeline. And upcoming meetings, Community Forum 1019 will be a prep for town meeting for folks that come out, ask as many questions as possible, get more information. We'll do a similar presentation, and obviously town meeting and the ballot vote. And kind of a summary of why now. I think from the town's perspective, from the project's perspective, I think, as Dr. Goff has stated, the needs are well documented and they're recognized by the MSBA in both schools. All future middle school students in the district would benefit from that solution. The MSBA has agreed to grant up to $37.9 million back to Walpole. That's what's in the scope and budget and funding agreement. There will be an audit all the way through, but the number will not be higher than 37.9, but in our experience, it typically comes in roughly in that amount. Historically low borrowing rates for the town share. Construction costs, in our experience, are going to continue to rise, as shown on the MSBA's chart that we just saw. They might level off a little bit from the last year, but in our opinion, they do not typically go down. Escalation for this year is projected at 5%. And future solutions will only be more expensive and perhaps without MSBA grants. As I mentioned before, we've seen schools where they do not pass a school, or they decide not to do the project, they come back. The cost of the project, if it's similar, is more expensive simply due to inflation. And a lot of times they can't wait to be in the MSBA's process, especially if they're rejected multiple times. They have to build the school for whatever reason, and then they end up funding the entire project and have no reimbursement. So just some things to consider. Where folks can get more information, the website, send us an email. We'll get back to you with, as soon as we can, with as many answers as we can get back to you. And then obviously check out the Mass School Building Authority's website. There's a lot of great information, and you can compare a lot of information to what other districts are doing or what other districts have done. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to mention what Brian said about why now, future solutions will only be more expensive and perhaps without MSBA grants. People talk about the Lincoln project, Lincoln Elementary School. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but back in 2012, the projected cost of $49 million failed in 2012, and MSBA would have paid $21 million. So the town then reapplied, and they were rejected in 2013, 2015, and 2016. So they were left with options ranging from $49 million for basic repairs, which would have back then given them a new building, or to look anywhere from $95 to $115 million for a new school. So finally, in 2018, the residents of Lincoln approved a property tax override and associated with everything, designing, renovating, rebuilding, equipping and furnishing the school. And the total project cost that was approved at town meeting and the ballot vote in December of 2018 was $93.9 million. So you can see that, future solutions would just be more expensive.
So they didn't get in the MSBA?
No.
They had to do it all themselves?
They had to do it all themselves.
Wow.
It failed 3 times. So they would have had a project cost of $49 million, and MSBA would have paid $21, and then they had the option of either fixing the school for that same amount of $49 million or building a new school. So it took about 2018. They did it themselves. It was
Yeah.
$93.9 million.
TAP A, the architects for Walpole, are working with the town of Tisbury right now, and they just had a very similar situation. The project failed at the vote for several reasons. Part of it was they wanted to restore or preserve the historical part of the building. They had MSBA reimbursement on the first project. They do not have MSBA reimbursement on this one, and basically increased the town share by about $23 million. So instead of paying for half of the first project or a third of the first project, they're now paying for the whole project. So it does happen. Something to think about.
Questions or comments from the committee? Mrs. Galloway?
Just a comment about the fact that acquiring state funding can be really difficult. And usually, towns like Walpole get thought of we get caught in the middle because we get viewed as we're not poor enough to qualify for a lot of grants. And yet we're not in the top tier of per capita revenue. So, to have the opportunity to get $37 million does not come along every day to a town like Walpole. So that, I think is just an important thing to keep in mind. A couple of questions and then a comment, because I've been listening to a lot of people asking questions, and everybody wants to understand the money part of it. Can you just reiterate, Brian, the fact that you have thought through the cost estimate because you have things like contingencies and an escalation factor, and your professionals, this is your field? Can you just sort of say that one more time?
Yeah, I don't know if they can go back to that slide, but all the project budgets that we put together, MSBA or not MSBA, but the MSBA requires a lot of these components in their budgets. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to make the most cost-effective project that you can make, but at the same time, you also have to guard yourself against things that pop up. I mean, there are reasons for change orders on projects that aren't necessarily related to the contractor or the designer. You hit something on the site, or you're tearing down the building and there's something you weren't expecting. Things pop up and you realize you need some additional furniture at the end of the project, or you want to change something mid-project and the architect has additional fees. That happens all the time. It's not atypical for a project. So you want to make sure that the town is safeguarded against what might happen on a project. That being said, at the end of the day, traditionally in new construction, change orders range about 2 to 3%, maybe. Right now, the contingency is 5%. So is it likely that you spend all of that contingency through the project? Not likely, but you have it there in case something really big happens. Right now, we don't foresee something like that happening on this project, but we do have to take down an old building. You never know what's in that building. But a lot of the jobs that we showed, you go in there trying to prepare for the worst case scenario, and then at the end of the day, if it's a well-designed, well-managed project and you have a good contractor and a good team, you typically are able to come in under that budget. The last thing you want to do is have to go back, halfway through a project or whatever might happen, to a town and say that you need more funds. And the MSBA is trying to safeguard against that at all costs by making sure that you've done your due diligence, you've looked at all the different cost factors that are out there, and they thoroughly vet this as well. They comb through these budgets and these estimates with a fine-tooth comb, ask a lot of very difficult questions and a lot of questions to make sure people have thought about everything. So when these go into them, because again, they're involved in this as well, and they're a partner, so they want this project to be a success. So a lot goes into that, and there are some safeguards that we think are adequate. At the end of the day, again, nothing is guaranteed, but in our experience that this process does produce a very well set up project to be successful and come in, at or below budget.
Great, because I think that's important. I think people want to know, and those of us that sit on the school building committee can attest to the fact that the detail that has been presented to us is intense. Like the budget itself, if I remember, was probably a 5 or 6 page spreadsheet with font like maybe size 8. So there was an awful lot of information with everything, because when people asked a question about, well, what if there was asbestos in the building when you take down the old building? You could say, oh, well, look at line 113. We budgeted for it right there. So the detail is there. And like you say, the process is pretty strong.
Yeah, and the MSBA, a lot of those early deliverables that Dr. Goff talked about in the early design and discovery phase of the project, you're doing as much as you can with the budget that you have, is doing some of that investigative work, looking at the old Bird building that's going to be demolished, to see if, do you have asbestos, do you not have hazardous material? Every building has something.
Yeah.
Taking some borings out on the site where you're going to build the building. A lot of schools, for instance, our Ashland project, they hit ledge where they want to build the building. So they have to do an assessment of how much ledge are they going to hit when they're out there, and they have to adjust their budget accordingly, their site cost budget, their contingencies. And again, they're looking at that budget has so many line items because it's basically a whole list of questions when you think about it. Do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? And they're making you go through that in such detail that you're trying to, again, check every box that you've looked at where potential costs could be coming from.
My other comment is more to us and probably to you, Mr. Buckley, about some of the other questions that I'm hearing are ones that involve us and the select board. And I think that during the month of October, it would be good to try to have a consensus meeting around if we bring on this new debt, it will come at a cost, and we know that it's you should know it, $438 to the average taxpayer. On the other hand, we do have debt rolling off, meaning that some other projects that we took on previously, we're about to finish paying for. I'd like to just be sure we're all on the same page about a couple of things. Rolling off debt, about what's the long-term vision in Walpole for renewable energy? Because we're talking about making this building solar ready? Is that what it?
Net zero energy ready.
Net zero energy ready. But I think that I know that people have asked me, but what's the long-term vision? Like, would it be smarter to be putting solar panels on the building right now? I don't know the answer to that. I don't really know the long-term plan. And then the third thing was, a lot of people want to know about the reuse of Johnson. So we're not going to have an answer to that by November 2nd, but I think people might just even want to be able to make their suggestions. There are a lot of people that are saying, I'd really like to see it be used for X, Y, and Z. So if we could set up a meeting to have some of those conversations so that when we do get to town meeting, we can be conversant on those topics, I'd feel better about the whole thing.
So are you seeking a joint board meeting?
I'm
Or-
saying, why don't we start with chair to chair? Just a conversation of how can we move forward, and then both boards would, I don't really care what the structure looks like.
All right, excellent. Yeah, I think your point's well taken, and obviously, we occupy but don't own or
Right.
control our school buildings. I for one, would love to, I would love nothing more than to set Mike Fisher loose and have him find the best EMSA, energy management service agreement possible on the building we're sitting in, on the library, I believe is solar ready too, or was built with that idea. I think, to your point, those type of, as someone who obviously is quite involved in a solar project in Walpole myself, those type of discussions are often done. You don't go roof to roof. You go, you have a decision like that in a campus-wide, town-wide, organization-wide discussion. I think that's an overdue discussion. It was one we kind of began right before the pandemic and was sort of sidelined by the need to keep the schools open and keep everyone safe. But I think that is a very important discussion, and what the selectmen are thinking, because in the end it ceases to be, Johnson ceases to be our building, and we really have very little say or interest as a body, a governmental body, in what they do.
Officially, no, but unofficially, yes, I would say.
Okay, that's fair. So I think, just to recap, you want to talk about the solar readiness piece and wider discussion around that, what we are doing with Johnson, just perhaps another venue to unpack just where we are with the debt schedule. Obviously, we're a little over under 20 years out from the high school renovation, which will be coming off, I think, in 25 or 26. There was also the renovations done to Boyden, purchase of Elm.
Yeah, I'd just like to be
Yeah.
on the same page,
Mhm.
get all of us on the same page
I think that'd be fair.
in that discussion.
Excellent. Anything further on that matter from
No, I'm done, thank you.
other questions? Representative Cameron, you went to one of them. Any thoughts?
Well, I think it would be a really good idea, like once, if the project passes, to have a new middle school. I think that it would be great also because at the high school there's so many different opportunities that you don't always get, like at the middle school, just because there's less people, there's less interest. So I think I'm very impressed with all the work that you did, so thank you.
Excellent. I think the comment about the inflation factor as well, you mentioned at Johnson a few nights ago, talking about once we kind of go out to bid and lock those things in, there's such a tremendous amount of federal money coming down the pike. There will be a tremendous amount of infrastructure projects in the future. So if on the one hand you have, if we don't do it now, we have to wait, but one of the kind of side consequences of waiting is construction costs in the next 3 or 4 years, sort of right outside of our bubble, are projected to, along with inflation, really ratchet up, even more so than just the normal sort of, in my view, as someone who kind of is adjacent to this. So I think it's perhaps worse than you've even talked about. I think I was at a meeting just earlier this week when someone talked about the town manager of Milton said, who used to be the DPW head of Boston, think about what it costs to do a mile of pipe, and that will get you a half a mile in 2 or 3 years, given all of the labor shortages and raw material shortages. So I think it's tremendously timely, and it would be a very, very different project in a couple of years, and a much greater bite for the community. So that's something to keep in mind. Mr. Hearn?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for the articulate presentation, the detailed presentation, and like dozens of presentations over the last couple of years. I mean, to this point, like right now, personally, I'm fired up, excited about the potential that Walpole has to chart a course for our community, for our students, for the future of our town. And I'm excited for us to endeavor in that way. And, you know, I just implore the community to check out all of the resources. Like, there's videos from all of our meetings, from school building committee meetings. There's so many questions that have been asked and unpacked. You know, just go do it. You know, this is awesome. But thank you.
Thanks, Brian. I don't know, you might be coming in a close second to Kathy Garvin. Or Compass or the head nurse, so you're a close second.
That's a good second to be in.
We're glad to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jarvis.
Thank you.
Moving on, next item under old business is, moving on to item number 6, Superintendent's report. Dr. Goff, do you have anything left?
Yeah, I know. A lot of my report included COVID and the middle school building project information. Just a couple of quick things. Bill Hahn and I continue to go out to the schools to greet our students and meet with students and staff. It's just really great to watch them now in groups and in learning centers, and it was really interesting. One particular elementary school at Elm I was in, it was a 3rd grade class, and one of the students asked the teacher, they were talking about math, and he raised his hand and asked, you know, are we going to be able to have math centers this year? And she immediately said, well, I'm glad you said that. That segues right into my next slide. She said, yes, we're going to have math centers. You would have thought it was gold. They waved their hands, they were clapping. I mean, you could tell they really missed working in math centers to be able to work, you know, with ST Math or Ed Puzzle or problem solving in groups or working with direct instruction with the teacher. And it really is wonderful to see. And, you know, Bill and I, you know, going into, and he's going to a lot of meetings, just working with staff and watching principals and our chairs, you know, talk to staff about how to maximize instruction, and having the staff talk about how to continue engagement and monitor progress. So it's really nice to see. Next 2 weeks are busy. We do have EL PAC on Tuesday at 7 p.m. There are a couple open houses next week. I believe they're Elm and Fisher. And then the following week, we have a slew of PAC meetings. So a busy couple of weeks. As Kathy Garvin mentioned, the Walpole Health Department will be hosting 2 public flu clinics in the month of October. We'll put it in our, I'll put it in my notes so they can click the link. The first one is Sunday, October 3rd. That's open to ages 4 and up. And that is from 10 to 2, and that's at the Walpole Council on Aging. The other one on the 18th is open for 60 and over. And that's at the Walpole Council on Aging. And then finally, please be advised that the Fales, Leach, Rogers, and Kundi scholarship application will be available on October 1st through Thursday, October 29th. The application will be found on the district website, or you can get it at the superintendent's office. Awards will be to undergraduates at 4-year accredited colleges. They will be eligible for scholarships each of their 4 years. And the primary criteria for awarding scholarships shall be on scholastic ability, need, and character of the applicant. So, thank you.
Excellent. Questions for Dr. Goff? Seeing none, moving on to subcommittee activity. We had a number of subcommittee activities. On Monday, September the 20th, we had a school committee workshop where we continued to talk about the committee's goals for the year. With a strong focus on academics, centering around math and student literacy. Would anyone else like to add any thoughts, comments, or observations from our workshop? Seeing none, we also had a superintendent evaluation subcommittee, which met on Tuesday, September 28th, 2021. We will have an update at a future meeting about the contents of Dr. Goff's goals. They were, of course, on brand, big, ambitious, and heavily cited, so we're excited to, as a committee, walk through that with you this year as well. And that superintendent evaluation subcommittee is slated to meet again in December. There's nothing legislative or anything else? I don't think so. Moving right along, citizens' comments. Seeing none. Mr. O'Hara, take it away with warrants.
Yeah. I would like to make a motion to approve the following expense warrants for the amounts listed in your packets. Those are 222012 and 222013.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ahern, second by Ms. Denizzi. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 600.
I'd also like to make a motion to approve the following payroll warrant for the amount listed, warrants for the amount listed in your packets. It's 2212 PA and 2212 PB.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ahern, second by Ms. Denizzi. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 600. Someone like to take gifts and donations?
Yes, I will make a motion to approve the following gifts and donations to Walpole High School from Stephen and Elizabeth Falker to the Michael Falker Memorial Fund, $200. To Bird Middle School, Johnson Middle School, Old Post Road School, from Bay State Textiles Recycling, $215.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Denizzi, second by Vice Chair Cyrek. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 600. Someone like to take minutes?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion to approve the September 30th school committee meeting minutes and the September 20th school committee workshop meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion by Vice Chair Cyrek, second by Ms. Denizzi. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 600.
That's the right date.
Say it.
September 16th. It's September 30th. It'd be the September 16th. We can't approve minutes from tonight.
Would you like to amend your motion?
I'd like to amend my motion to approve the September 16th school committee meeting minutes and the September 20th school committee workshop meeting minutes.
Second.
Amended motion by Ms. Cyrek, second by Ms. Denizzi. All those in favor of the amended motion? Abstained? 600. Would someone like to take Mr. Green's?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Denizzi, second by Ms. Garrett. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 600. Thank you very much.
Thank you.